In the bleak midwinter, a boy stood at the edge of the forest, the icy breath of Norway biting at his skin. Imagine this. A breathless silence blanketed the clearing, broken only by the crackling of pine resin torches, their acrid smoke curling into the frigid air. He was barely 12, but today he was expected to shed the skin of childhood and don the armor of a warrior. An initiation steeped in blood and ancient customs. The crisp snow crunched beneath his feet, a harsh reminder that this moment wouldn't be one of joyous celebration, but a trial that could cost him his life. What drove a boy to willingly face such terror? In the distance, he could see figures moving, cloaked in shadows, their faces obscured by the night. They were the elders, his father among them, their stern expressions reflecting the weight of generations past. The boy's heart raced, not from fear alone, but from a stubborn surge of longing to prove himself, to embody the strength his kin demanded. He grasped the hilt of a bone-handled knife, the runes etched into its surface whispering promises of valor. As the sun dipped below the horizon, surrendering the sky to a tapestry of stars, he felt the cold creep up into his bones. January temperatures hovered around 15 degrees C, but the chill was nothing compared to the dread settling in his stomach. Roughly 20% of boys who undertook this initiation never returned. They failed to conquer the trials that awaited them, lost forever in the embrace of the frozen earth. The boy swallowed hard, forcing down the bile rising in his throat. Silence was expected. Fear was shameful. He remembered his mother's fierce gaze, the way she had urged him to be brave, to seize his destiny. Yet the weight of expectation pressed down upon him like an anvil, each tick of the clock reminding him that there was no turning back. With one last breath, he stepped forward, the elders' torches flickering as they acknowledged his presence. Each flame danced like a hungry spirit, longing for the sacrifice it had been promised. As he knelt before the altar, the biting cold seemed to seep into his very soul. His heartbeat thudded in his ears, a relentless drum echoing the call of the unknown. Would he rise a warrior or fall to the frost and shadows of the woods? The moment stretched out before him, taut and trembling, a bridge between boyhood and the demanding world of warriors. He didn't cry. The warmth trickling down his chest felt almost foreign. And as the first sparks of the fire ignited, illuminating the darkened faces around him, he understood that what lay ahead was not merely a test. It was the beginning of a legacy. The air in the longhouse hung heavy, thick with the acrid scent of burning pine resin and the sharp tang of wood smoke. Shadows danced along the walls as the flickering torchlight illuminated the faces of the elders, creased with worry and lined with the weight of unspoken fears. Outside, the January winds howled, a reminder of the bitter cold that gripped the village, where temperatures often dipped to a bone-numbing 15 degrees Celsius. The collective breath of the gathered men formed a misty fog, their murmurs rising then falling like the waves of a stormy sea. "Fate has dealt us a treacherous hand," grumbled Eric, the oldest among them, his gnarled hands resting heavily on the carved wooden table. "That vessel was cursed. To have lost it to the sea. It's a warning. We should prepare for the worst." Others shifted uneasily, and Bjorn, a younger man with fierce blue eyes, shot back. "And what of our honor? We cannot let fear dictate our paths. The villagers are already restless. They need to see strength, not doubt." But what fuels a warrior's courage when faced with the specter of loss? The tension in the room crackled, as palpable as the heat from the torches. The recent storm had wrecked one of their longships, an irreplaceable piece of their identity and livelihood. The loss wasn't just wood and nails. It was a breach in their way of life, a chink in the armor of their reputation as seafaring warriors. A deep silence fell over the room as the elders processed the implications. A bone-handled knife, inscribed with runes of protection, lay discarded on the table, forgotten in the chaos of debate. It served as a reminder of their beliefs, their customs, but now it felt more like a relic of a bygone era when the threats were clear and conquerable. "The villagers will want a scapegoat," murmured Ingrid, the lone woman among them, her voice cutting through the thick tension like a bitter wind. "They'll want someone to blame for this misfortune, and it will fracture us if we do not act." As eyes turned toward Bjorn, he felt the weight of their gazes, the unspoken demand for action. One mistake had set a chain of events in motion, and the storm outside seemed to mirror the tempest brewing within these walls. And as the collective anxiety mounted, Bjorn could only wonder, how much blood would they be willing to shed to restore their honor? The unanswered question echoed in his mind, growing louder with every heartbeat. Outside, the wind shrieked as if urging them toward a reckoning. The flames flickered, and a shadow moved across the doorway, a reminder that they were not alone in their tumult. In the stillness that followed, uncertainty hung like a noose, and the elders braced for the decision that could unravel everything they had built. He stood at the edge of the clearing, the icy winds biting through the thin fabric of his tunic, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. Before him lay the remnants of the village, smoke curling towards the steel-gray sky like the spirits of the fallen. A pyre of broken timber and crushed hopes burned brightly, casting flickering shadows that danced across the faces of the gathered. The scent of charred wood mingled with the acrid tang of burning flesh. A reminder that honor and loyalty were not just words carved into the stone at the village's entrance. They were the very fibers that wove the tapestry of a warrior's life. Just days before, the boy had sat at the feet of his father, listening to tales of honor, loyalty, and the valor of their forefathers. Yet now, those stories felt like distant echoes, lost among the shouts of the clan gathering to witness the punishment meted out for betrayal. What does it mean to be loyal? He thought, a question that twisted in his gut like a blade. Tension hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, as the elder stood before the crowd, his face a mask of sorrow and rage. A boy, once a friend, now the scapegoat, was chained to the stake. His eyes darted around, pleading for understanding, but the villagers had made their choice. The betrayal had cost them dearly, a raid thwarted by a traitor's tongue. The boy shivered, not just from the cold, but from the fear of what lay ahead. Was loyalty so fragile? He wondered, watching as the flames licked the boy's feet, each gasp a reminder of the stakes involved. The villagers shouted curses, their voices intertwining with the crackling fire, a brutal symphony of justice and vengeance. The boy took a step back, the bone-handled knife at his belt feeling heavier than usual. Would he have the courage to stand by his oath, to uphold the honor of his clan, even when faced with the horror of this visceral reminder? With winter's chill seeping into his bones, he felt the weight of the decision bearing down on him. The price of honor was steep, and what had once seemed like a distant concept now loomed before him, as real and burning as the flames that swallowed his friend whole. And as the flames rose higher, consuming not just the flesh but the very essence of loyalty, he understood. In this world, choices sealed destinies, and the cost of failure was a price too terrible to bear. In the heart of the village, the winds whispered secrets through the pines, carrying echoes of a past filled with blood and flame. An ancient storyteller, a weathered man named Gorm, with a voice like gravel, stood before a circle of eager listeners, the flickering light of resin torches casting erratic shadows against the rough-hewn walls of the longhouse. The villagers huddled together, a mix of curiosity and dread tight in their chests. What tales might the old man weave tonight? Gorm's gnarled hands gestured as he spoke of a time when the village was not just a cluster of homes, but a stronghold, a bastion of Viking might. It was said that beneath the earth, the stench of betrayal lingered like smoke from 1,000 torches. Once a clan from the north, he intoned, sought to claim our land, our lives. They came with axes raised high and hearts full of ambition. His eyes flickered with a fire of their own, those deep-set orbs that had seen more than any man should. As he spoke, the villagers could almost taste the salt of the sea from the raiders' ships, feel the icy grip of a blade at their throats. But we did not yield. We fought back with a ferocity that would echo through generations. Silence fell over the crowd, a palpable tension hanging thick in the air. The memory of their ancestors loomed large, a ghostly reminder of the price of vengeance. What kind of men did it take to exact such retribution? Gorm's voice lowered, his tone shifting. Yet victory came with a cost. The blood spilled was not just that of enemies, but of kin. And the vengeance we wrought birthed further cycles, each act of reprisal sowing seeds of resentment that would grow deep in our hearts. The intricately carved bone-handled knife resting at Gorm's side glinted ominously, a talisman of an era long past yet never fully buried. With each word, the villagers felt the weight of their ancestors' choices pressing down on them. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, creeping closer around the flickering torchlight. Even now, Gorm continued, we are haunted by the ghosts of those we have wronged, the villages we have burned. Can we ever escape the legacy of our forebears? The crowd shifted uneasily, thoughts grappling with the fear that perhaps the past was not so distant after all. Would the thirst for vengeance claim them too? As the tale faded, the air grew heavy with unspoken fears, leaving the villagers tethered to a history they couldn't outrun. They knew the shadows of the past had a way of creeping into the present. And amid the flickering light, one question remained. How far would they go to honor their ancestors' blood? But as the night deepened, the flame in Gorm's eyes dimmed, leaving behind the chilling realization that the echoes of vengeance were never truly silenced. And now, standing on the precipice of their own choices, what legacy would they forge? As dawn broke over the fjord, a biting wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the sharp scent of pine and the distant echoes of the sea. The boy stood at the threshold of manhood, heart pounding like a distant war drum, surrounded by the flickering glow of bone-handled torches. Each flame danced like a spirit, casting tall, wavering shadows that seemed to mock his uncertainty. What did bravery truly mean? Today, he would face the trial of the cold, a rite steeped in tradition as old as the mountains themselves. The elders had gathered, clad in wool and leather, their lined faces grim with the weight of expectation. The chilling January air cut through his tunic, biting at his skin, but he clenched his jaw, determined not to show weakness. Around him, the other boys, some barely older than he, stood with a shared silence that thrummed with collective fear and anticipation. Remember, one elder intoned, his voice gruff like the bark of a tree weathered by centuries. This is not just a test of strength, but of spirit. The cold will not be your only enemy. As if to punctuate his warning, the wind howled louder, swirling snowflakes into a blizzard dance. Each boy was to step into the woods, where the trees loomed like ancient sentinels, and retrieve a stone marked with their family's rune. Failure meant not just shame, but a loss of identity. Roughly 20% of boys never returned from this rite. With a final glance back at the flickering flames, the boy took a deep breath, feeling the cold air expand in his lungs like ice. He stepped forward into the shadows of the forest, the snow crunching underfoot, muffling any sound save for the distant whispers of the elders' chants. He felt small among the towering pines, their branches heavy with snow, creating a cathedral of nature where every breath echoed his resolve. But what if he faltered? What if he lost his way in the dark embrace of the trees, swallowed whole by the very wilderness that birthed his people? The thought clawed at him, threading fear with the icy air until it became almost tangible. Yet something deeper urged him onward, a primal instinct to prove himself, to carve his name into the narrative of his tribe. As he ventured deeper, the world faded into a blur, the torchlight swallowed by the thickening darkness. Each step felt like an eternity, the weight of his ancestors resting upon his shoulders. The trees creaked, their warnings mingling with the howl of the wind. Hope flickered and dimmed like the torches he had left behind. In that moment, as he stood alone, the weight of expectation pressing on him like a heavy cloak, he wondered if he could truly embrace the challenge before him. The call of manhood was deafening, yet the path was fraught with shadows. He had not yet found the stone, but the forest held its breath, waiting. Around him, something stirred, and the silence felt alive. A breath, a whisper, perhaps even a promise of what was to come. Would he return as a warrior, or as a ghost of his own making? A thin layer of fog rolled through the village, wrapping around the wooden structures like a shroud. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of smoke, the kind that sent a shiver up the spine of any villager who had seen war's aftermath. A lone boy stood near the edge of the settlement, his heart pounding like the drum beats of a war march. This was no ordinary day. The sounds of laughter had faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness that hung over the village, pregnant with dread. In the distance, the low rumble of drums began to rise, threading its way through the chilly air. The signal of an approaching force, each beat echoing a reminder of the violent world outside their walls. Untrained though he was, the boy felt the pull of instinct that urged him to flee, but he didn't. He remained rooted in place, staring at the horizon, where shadows danced like specters against the fading light. But what lurked beyond that line? As the first scream pierced the silence, he flinched. The villagers moved like a well-oiled machine, fear turning their muscles taut as they prepared for the onslaught. Torches were lit, casting flickering shadows that played tricks on the mind. Was that a figure lurking behind the trees, or just a trick of the flame? The boy clutched the hilt of a knife, a bone-handled relic of long-ago battles, its runes worn smooth from years of use. If only it could impart the wisdom of every warrior that had wielded it. Chaos erupted as dark figures charged through the tree line, their intentions clear. The boy's breath quickened, his heart racing with the primal urge to survive. He'd heard the stories, the tales of raids that turned homes to ashes, of families shattered by a single mistake. The villagers had always told him that fear was a weakness, but in that moment, it felt insurmountable. Was he truly ready to face this darkness? As arrows rained down like angry hornets, the boy found himself swept up in the fray. A neighbor shouted orders, the clang of metal ringing in his ears as the world blurred into a cacophony of sound. A dark figure loomed ahead, the glint of steel catching the last rays of sunlight. The boy's grip tightened on his knife. But would courage be enough? He stepped forward, heart racing, the bite of the cold air mingling with sweat on his brow. Just beyond that line of trees, he could almost make out the faces of the attackers, twisted in rage and bloodlust. This was the moment he had dreaded, yet craved, a test of worthiness that would define him. The flames of retribution flickered in the distance, a reminder of the consequences that awaited those unprepared for battle. And so, with a howl that split the night, he charged forward, a reckless flame ignited within him. But was he prepared for the truth that awaited him on the other side of this brutal initiation? As the frostbitten trees twisted against the winter sky, a boy named Leaf stumbled upon a clearing, his heart racing like a wild hare. The ground crunched beneath his boots, encased in thick ice, and the acrid scent of pine resin wafted from his torch, flickering dimly against the encroaching shadows. He had come this far, but it was more than just the bitter cold he feared now. He caught sight of figures emerging from the gloom, their silhouettes framed by the pale moon. Another clan, his clan's sworn enemies. There were no words exchanged yet. The air was thick with the anticipation of violence. Leif's instincts screamed at him to run, to flee back to the safety of his home where loyalty was forged in blood and camaraderie. But what would be the cost of that flight? Before him stood a rival warrior, tall and broad-shouldered, a knot of leather at his waist where a bone-handled knife rested, glistening wickedly under the moonlight. The warrior's eyes burned with a fierce challenge, and the tension in the air could have been sliced with a dagger. As the rival clan gathered behind their leader, Leif felt the weight of his own clan's expectations press against his chest, like the weight of the winter snow. Would he prove himself strong, or would he falter in the face of the unknown? Honor, Leif muttered under his breath, the word tasting bitter like the cold bite in the air. What did it mean in a world where strength ruled and mercy was a fleeting notion? The rival clan's laughter rang out, cruel and mocking, slicing through the silence. "What is a boy like you doing here? This is no place for the weak," one of them taunted. A knot tightened in Leif's stomach, but he couldn't back down. The very essence of his identity clashed against the notion of retreat, and the faces of his own clan flickered in his mind like candle flames, urging him forward. A low growl echoed from the rival leader, a warning. "You stand on our ground, boy. Choose your next words wisely." Leif's mouth felt dry, but he fought the urge to swallow his fear. He straightened his spine and squared his shoulders. "I seek only what is mine," he declared, voice cracking like ice underfoot, unsure if he was referring to territory or his own courage. He had no weapons save for his words, but they were all he had, a flimsy shield against the encroaching tide of hostility. The clans stared each other down, tension coiling tighter, like a bowstring ready to snap. Leif's heart raced, pounding a primal rhythm against his ribs. Would he stand his ground, or would he be crushed beneath the weight of tradition and rivalry? He didn't know what would happen next, but the night air felt electric, charged with the possibility of violence. And as the first shout rang out, the world blurred into a chaotic dance of honor and defiance, a storm unleashed. But in that moment, did his heart beat for loyalty, or for something more? A boy clutches his bone-handled knife, the inscribed runes glinting in the flickering torchlight as smoke curls around him like a serpent. Outside the walls of his village, the sound of clashing metal and anguished cries pierces the icy air. A symphony of desperation just beyond the wooden palisade. The acrid scent of burning wood mixes with blood. An orchestra of destruction conducted by fate. He can feel the heat radiating from the flames that lick at the night sky. But what burns hotter is the fear lodged deep in his gut. To his left, a group of warriors rallies, their breaths visible in the winter's chill, eyes wide and wild. They hurl themselves back into the fray, driven by a primal instinct that swells and ebbs like the tide. Yet this boy is frozen at the edge of the conflict, a silent witness to the chaos. Should he join them? The elders had warned that inaction is a betrayal worse than failure. But what if his decision could lead to even greater losses? The weight of his name, a name whispered among the people, the bloodline that stretched back to heroes, hangs heavy on his shoulders. As he watches a warrior fall, a gasp escaping his lips, he remembers the stories told by the firelight. Tales of bravery, of brothers and sisters who had fought for their kin and for their home. Yet here he stands, a heartbeat away from the choice that could shatter everything. Did the legends of his ancestors ever face choices so agonizing? Would they have fled or forged ahead, driven by the knowledge that life is measured not by comfort, but by the courage to confront the flames? Just then, a sudden hush sweeps through the air, a momentary stillness that feels almost sacred. The boy's eyes dart back to the smoke billowing from his village. His village. Families were huddled together, the cries of children rising above the din. More than just wood and thatch lay in the balance. It was the legacy he yearned to protect. A chilling thought clings to him. What good is a warrior's heart if it beats behind a wall of fear? The sound of an arrow striking wood pulls him from his reverie, and he makes his choice. But as he steps toward the tumult, the world narrows to a singular focus. Every sound muted, every face around him blurred. He can almost taste the smoke in the air, and his hands tremble with the weight of his decision. Will he rise to become the hero his village needs? Or will he become a ghost of regret, forever haunted by the echoes of this night? As dawn's light filtered through the scorched remains of the village, shadows clung to the charred wood like ghosts reluctant to leave. The acrid scent of burnt timber mingled with the sharp bite of salt from the sea, a bitter reminder of what had been lost. Villagers moved among the ruins, faces drawn and empty, their once vibrant laughter silenced as they sifted through the ashes of their lives. A bloodied blanket here, a bone-handled knife there, each item a memory, now tainted by the fire's rage. What were these remnants but echoes of joy twisted into sorrow? In the center of what had been the great hall, young Eric knelt on the blackened earth, his pulse an erratic drum beneath the weight of grief. His fingers traced the outlines of worn runes carved into a nearby post, symbols of strength that now felt like cruel taunts. He had survived the initiation, but at what cost? The faces of his fallen friends haunted him, their laughter replaced by the wailing of mothers searching for lost sons. The wind whispered their names, carrying the weight of their absence like a shroud. Could he ever forgive himself for making it back? The question gnawed at him, relentless and sharp. Irik's heart ached for those who would never return, their journeys cut short by a single tragic misstep. His thoughts spiraled, mingling visions of valor with the stark reality of loss. Shadows of valor cloaked by grief. Each step he took a reminder of their sacrifice. As villagers gathered to recount the tales of bravery, Irik stood apart, observing their camaraderie through a fog of isolation. They spoke in reverent tones of the raid, each word a tribute but also a dagger, a reminder that the cost of war was never just valor. It was blood. Blood spilled on familiar soil, blood pooled beneath the weight of the past. They didn't call it cruelty, they called it the price of strength. But what price was too high? Eric's chest tightened with the weight of knowledge. He had been taught that warriors were meant to stand tall, to face the onslaught with unyielding resolve. Yet here he was, a boy draped in sorrow, trapped between the expectations of honor and the reality of grief. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that blurred the edges of the village. Eric glanced toward the horizon, where the sea met the sky, a calm contrast to the chaos within him. He knew they would rebuild, that the strength of their ancestors would guide them forward. But could he ever escape the ghosts of that day? He turned away from the gathering, stepping back into the silence that clung to him like a second skin. Each breath felt heavy, laden with unspoken words and unprocessed grief. And as the sun set, casting the village in a golden hue tinged with fire's remnants, Eric wondered if the price of survival would forever haunt him. Would the weight of loss echo in his heart like a battle cry that would never fade? The sun peeked over the jagged horizon, casting a pale light over the remnants of the village, where charred beams jutted from the ground like broken teeth. The acrid scent of smoke still clung to the air, mixing with the damp earth and the faintest hint of pine resin. A reminder of what had been lost. A few villagers shuffled about, stepping gingerly over the rubble, their faces a blend of sorrow and determination. Each footfall seemed to echo the weight of their collective grief, the silence punctuated only by the soft crackle of embers and the distant murmur of the sea. What does it take to pick up the pieces after everything has been taken? For these people, it meant more than just rebuilding their homes. It meant piecing together the very fabric of their community, frayed and torn by the fire's indiscriminate hunger. Freydis, her hands calloused from years of labor, was the first to lift a splintered plank, its surface still warm. "We must clear this, or it will haunt us," she said, her voice surprisingly steady against the backdrop of despair. Eyes turned toward her. Some nodded, while others remained stoic, unwilling to engage. A knot formed in the pit of Freydis' stomach as she glanced at her neighbor Torvald, who still blamed her family for the raid that had led to this devastation. She remembered how, just a month ago, they shared mead and laughter during the harvest festival, where the air had been sweet with roasted game and the crisp autumn breeze. Now, that breeze felt like a cruel reminder of their fragility. The villagers were divided, some eager to rebuild, others fixated on the past. It was a powder keg, and Freydis sensed that a single spark could ignite old grudges. As they worked, the villagers exchanged furtive glances, whispers swirling around like fallen leaves in the wind. Some carried stones to rebuild the hearth, while others hesitated, clutching bone-handled knives etched with runes, reminders of their forebears' strength and the blood that had been spilled. Would their ancestors approve of this discord? Or would they scorn them for forgetting the bonds that had once united them? Freydis watched the sun rise higher, the sky bleeding hues of orange and lavender, and thought of the gods who demanded sacrifice. But what kind of sacrifice would appease them now? Would it be unity, or the bitter taste of vengeance that lingered in their throats? As she placed another plank on the makeshift wall, she felt eyes on her. Torvald stood a distance away, watching her with a mix of contempt and longing, as if he wrestled with a choice that could change everything. The weight of the moment pressed on Freydis like the chill of a winter storm, unforgiving and uncertain. The dawn's light betrayed nothing of the darkness festering beneath the surface. Could they truly forge a new beginning, or would the past always overshadow their future? In that fragile moment, hope felt like a flame flickering against the wind, waiting for a breath to either extinguish it or fan it into a blaze. The night air was uncommonly still, the kind of silence that coiled around the village like a thick fog, heavy with the scent of pine and the lingering acrid smoke of last week's funeral pyres. Young Torvald stood at the edge of the clearing, fists clenched, the weight of his failure pressing down on his shoulders like the thick snow that still clung stubbornly to the ground. He could hear the distant whispers of the village, muted and cautious, as if the very walls of the longhouse were holding their breath. But beneath the surface, beneath the layers of fear and loss, lay a simmering anger, a flame that had yet to ignite. What did it mean to seek vengeance when all you had was the memory of your own weakness? Suddenly, the bushes rustled, and out stepped a figure cloaked in shadows. A tall silhouette framed against the flickering light of the bonfire that danced elsewhere in the village. Torvald's heartbeat quickened. This wasn't the friendly face of a neighbor or the kind smile of an elder. No, this was a stranger, and without knowing why, a chill crept up Torvald's spine. The figure moved closer, revealing a face half hidden beneath a hood. Yet the glint of steel caught the firelight. A dagger, its hilt wrapped in leather, inscribed with runes that whispered promises of power and revenge. "You seek to reclaim your honor, boy?" The stranger's voice was low, gravelly, and impossible to ignore. "The blood of those who wronged you still stains your conscience. Will you let it wash over you forever? Or will you rise from the ashes and strike back?" The words lingered in the crisp night air like smoke trailing from a torch, twisting and curling into the darkness. Could he truly rise? Or was he merely a shadow of what he had hoped to be? Torvald's mind raced, recalling the stories his father had told him of warriors who had faced their fears and emerged stronger. But those were tales, myths dressed in valor and glory. He was just a boy, and with every heartbeat, doubt seeped into his resolve. Could he handle the weight of vengeance? Would he find redemption in the fire of revenge, or would it consume him entirely? The stranger stepped closer, the dagger glinting ominously. Join me, and together we will carve a path through the hearts of your enemies. You have the strength. You just need to unleash it. Torvald's breath caught in his throat as he stared into the depths of the stranger's dark eyes, feeling the gravity of a choice he hadn't anticipated. He didn't know what waited at the end of this twisted road, but the taste of vengeance lingered on his tongue like the acrid smoke that enveloped his home. What awaited him beyond the village? Would it be redemption, or would it simply lead him deeper into darkness? The air turned thick with frost as he stepped beyond the familiar, his breath spiraling into the biting cold like a ghost fleeing the living. Though the sun hung low, it offered no warmth, just a pale reminder of the warmth he once knew. It was the kind of chill that found its way into your bones, whispering of ancient curses and lingering shadows. He wrapped his fingers around the bone-handled knife at his side, the runes carved into the hilt pulsing faintly in the dim light. Was it courage he sought, or merely a way to quiet the echoes of his past? Ahead, the path was lined with dark pine trees, their spindly branches clawing at the sky as if trying to pull down the very sun that eluded him. A gust of wind howled through the boughs, sounding eerily like the lament of warriors long lost. Men who had faced worse than this. Men who had returned with glory, while others never returned at all. Could a boy like him ever be worthy of that kind of honor? He pressed on, the biting cold gnawing at his resolve, but the weight of expectation was heavier still. The landscape morphed as he advanced, rocky outcroppings jutting out like jagged teeth ready to snap. Each step felt like a negotiation with fate itself, a dance on the edge of a blade. He could almost hear the laughter of his friends. He had wanted to be like them, fearlessly charging into the fray. But now he was just a solitary figure, dwarfed by the enormity of the world around him. Would they laugh if they could see him now, lost and trembling in the wilderness? Suddenly, he stumbled into a clearing, the ground blanketed with snow that sparkled like shards of glass. It felt wrong, too peaceful for a boy on the brink of becoming a warrior. He knelt, pressing his palm against the cold earth, feeling the thrum of life beneath the frost. Here lay the secrets of those who had come before, spirits of the fallen perhaps, waiting for him to make his choice. Would he turn back, or would he brave the path ahead? As twilight settled like a shroud, shadows began to stretch across the clearing, mingling with his fears. He could almost see the faces of the warriors who had taught him to wield a sword, their eyes filled with hope and expectation. But the ghosts of his past loomed larger, reminding him of every failure, every moment of doubt. He stood, adrenaline surging through him, heart pounding like a war drum. The night whispered his name, inviting him deeper into the unknown, where triumph and ruin awaited in equal measure. But as he gazed into the darkness, a single thought pierced through the chaos. What awaited him at the end of this path? Would he find himself, or would he be swallowed whole by the very shadows that haunted him? As the sun dipped below the jagged line of the horizon, painting the sky with hues of fiery orange and deepening violet, Bjorn stood before the looming shape of the ancient longhouse. The acrid scent of smoke still lingered in the air, a reminder of the destruction wrought by the relentless raider who had plagued his village for too long. Was this how it felt to stare death in the face, adrenaline coursing through his veins like a wild river? He tightened his grip on the bone-handled knife, the runes etched into its blade shimmering in the fading light. A talisman of destiny. The longhouse, once a place of laughter and warmth, now cast a menacing shadow, its once bright wooden beams blackened by flames. Bjorn could hear the faint sounds of movement within, a low murmur of voices that set his heart racing. In the depths of his chest, fear wrestled with resolve. Would he emerge victorious, Or would he become yet another story woven into the tapestry of his village's lost souls? He took a breath, the cold air biting at his lungs, and stepped forward. Each crunch of snow beneath his boots echoed like a war drum, punctuating the silence that enveloped the landscape. The villagers had spoken of their tormentor, a phantom figure cloaked in darkness, a man whose very name filled hearts with dread. Tonight, Bjorn would confront that specter, the embodiment of his people's suffering. As he pushed open the creaking door, the flicker of torches illuminated the room, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. Before him stood the raider, a hulking figure with wild, tangled hair and eyes that glinted like shards of ice. The sight of him sent a jolt of rage through Bjorn. This man had stolen everything from him. "Why did you do it?" Bjorn shouted, his voice steadier than he felt. "Why did you burn my home?" The raider laughed, a low, guttural sound that twisted in the air. "It was never personal, boy. You should have known better than to think you could stand against me." The words dripped with disdain, reverberating in the room like a death knell. Bjorn's pulse quickened. What did it mean to be strong? Was it bloodlust, or something deeper, a fire that burned not only for revenge, but for those who could no longer fight? With a grimace, he lunged forward, the knife gleaming in the torchlight. The raider sidestepped, his movements fluid and predatory, but Bjorn's newfound strength surged through him. He wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a vessel of the pain and fury of his people. They had not suffered in vain. With each swing of his blade, he poured every ounce of his grief, fear, and rage into the fight. The clash of steel rang out, a symphony of chaos and desperation. What would it take to reclaim what had been lost? The answer danced just out of reach, like the last flicker of sunlight sinking below the horizon. He pressed on, each strike a question screaming for resolution, each parry a defiant reminder of the lives stolen from him. But as the battle raged on, the room felt smaller, the shadows closing in like a tightening noose. Bjorn's energy was waning, the weight of the knife heavy in his hand. Would he rise victorious, or would he become yet another victim of this relentless cycle? In that moment, he realized that the fight was not just for revenge. It was a fight for his very soul. The raider lunged, and a sharp pain pierced Bjorn's side. He stumbled back, breath hitching, staring into the eyes of his enemy. And in that instant, a chilling thought crossed his mind. Was this truly the end? The air hung heavy, thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning wood. The village lay in ruins, flames licking at the sky like the long, hungry tongues of hungry wolves. A boy, barely a man, stood amidst the devastation, the heat radiating against his skin, yet failing to warm the chill that gripped his heart. His jaw clenched tight, a bone-handled knife, now stained with both enemy and his own blood, dangling loosely from his fingertips, its runes glinting ominously in the flickering light. He had sought strength, but what did it cost him? Around him, the remnants of his choices sprawled like broken dreams. Homes that had once echoed with laughter now lay silent, their charred frames like skeletons of forgotten joy. The villagers had trusted him, believed in the promise of his vengeance, and yet here he stood, a bereaved boy transformed into a reluctant warrior. He had watched, heart pounding, as fear morphed into fury, igniting his resolve to burn the raiders from his memory, to eradicate the stain of their betrayal. But as he surveyed the ashen remains, he wondered, was this how victory felt? A lingering silhouette caught his eye. A girl, her hair bright against the soot-darkened landscape, knelt with her hands pressed against the ground, trembling as if the earth itself were mourning. She had once been a childhood friend, now consigned to the shadows of grief, her life forever altered by his choices. He had liberated her village, but now it was a ghost of its former self, haunted by flames rather than the warmth of kinship. He stepped forward, a heaviness growing in his chest. "What have I done?" he whispered, though the wind swallowed his words. His thoughts spiraled as he turned to the horizon, where the last embers of the day surrendered to the encroaching night. The weight of his glory felt more like a shackle than a crown. The warriors who fought alongside him echoed in his mind, their faces flashing before him, not as heroes, but as shadows of what could have been. Each had their own reasons for following him into battle, but none had returned unscathed. A harsh truth dawned. Vengeance had woven itself into the very fabric of his being and consumed everything he once cherished. With each breath, he felt the world closing in, the silence of the village almost suffocating. He couldn't shake the feeling that victory was an illusion, a fleeting moment built on the ruin of lives. And somewhere in that haze of destruction, the question lingered. Was this the legacy he wanted to forge? The flames flickered around him, teasing a warmth that felt unreachable. He looked down at the knife, its blade dulling in the aftermath of his deeds. Would he be remembered as a hero or a monster? The answer danced just beyond his grasp, like smoke curling into the night sky, leaving behind only the taste of ash. In that moment, amidst the ruins of his triumph, he realized, victory has its price, and sometimes that cost is far greater than anticipated. The village lay shrouded in the muted colors of dawn, a haunting stillness settling over the scorched earth that had once thrived with life. Smoke still curled lazily from the remnants of burning structures, acrid and bitter, a reminder of the chaos that had erupted just days prior. As the boy approached, his heart thudded in his chest, each beat a painful reminder of what he had witnessed and what he had lost. Would the villagers see him as a survivor or a ghost of their former selves? The air, sharp and cold, stung like betrayal against his skin. He could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the clanking of bone-handled knives against wooden tables, the warm camaraderie of shared meals, now haunted by the specter of fear. A part of him wanted to flee, to escape the memories that threatened to drown him. But he pressed on, the weight of the past clinging to his shoulders like a heavy cloak. Perhaps they would see a different boy, one forged in the crucible of fire and loss. But would they acknowledge the sacrifice that had shaped him? As he stepped into the remnants of his home, he was met with faces he once knew but felt estranged from. A mixture of pity and condemnation settled across their features. They had lost so much, and the boy was a reminder of the cost of their choices. The elders, once his guiding stars, now cast shadows of doubt. Had they failed him? Were they responsible for the violence that erupted from their collective mistake? The boy's hands trembled at his sides, aching as he remembered the whispers of silent judgment. A bone-handled knife lay on the ground, its edge nicked and dull, a token of the initiation he had barely survived. He picked it up, feeling the weight of it in his palm, the runes etched along the handle, now a language he struggled to understand. Had he returned as a man, or merely a vessel of their regrets? The villagers watched, their expressions inscrutable as he kneeled amidst the ruin, the cold earth seeping through his clothes, a stark contrast to the fire that had engulfed his past. Would they forgive the boy who had survived when so many had perished? The air was thick with unspoken words, the kind that twist like thorns in the gut, and the boy finally faced them, each breath a courageous act of defiance. He could almost feel the weight of their expectations. Would he offer them forgiveness, or would he let the flames of memory consume him entirely? As he rose, the village lay before him, a shattered mirror reflecting what they had become. The challenge of healing felt insurmountable, yet there was an undeniable glimmer of hope in the ashes. He stood, a figure caught between worlds, the past that demanded justice and the future that begged for mercy. In that moment, he realized the true burden, to find a way to emerge not just as a survivor, but as a bridge between forgiveness and legacy. Would they find a way to move forward together? Or would the shadows of vengeance cling to their hearts, forever dividing them? As the sun broke through the clouds, casting a harsh light on the remnants of their lives, he couldn't help but wonder, could they all rise from the ashes, or were some wounds too deep to heal?